In the meantime, Mark Zuckerberg has hired Hillary Clinton's pollster. Yeah, you heard that right. And, or at least the Clinton campaign's pollster, or a pollster who worked with or for the Clinton campaign. And which is causing, and he just did this listening tour where he traveled to, I think, to every state in the union or a bunch of states, and just kind of showed up and met with people and, hey, I'm your friendly local billionaire, And a lot of people were like, oh, whoa, wow, a billionaire. Oh, yeah. How cool is that? I'm going to talk about great wealth in a little bit, too. But when he was first doing this a couple months back, there were a lot of people going, is he thinking about running for political office? And if so, what political office do you run for in every state? Ding, 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 ding. Yes, there's a billionaire in the White House right now. Oligarchs can become president in this new post-Reagan era. And it used to be the oligarchs simply owned the president, as in Reagan and both Bushes. Now the oligarchs are actually thinking, well, now the oligarchs have actually become president. Is this really what we want? Is this the kind of country that we are, that we think that oligarchy is like the way to go? There's just a remarkable piece in the Washington Post. It was a few days ago in the Washington Post about great wealth and the impact that great wealth has on people. The title of it is, it's by Charles Matthews and Evan Sandsmark. Being rich wrecks your soul. We used to know that. And he goes back, he starts out, with Rome and Mr. Potter and A Wonderful Life and whatnot. And then he says, over the past few years, a pile of studies from behavioral sciences all say more or less being rich is really bad for you. Wealth, it turns out, leads to behavioral and psychological maladies. And I'll continue this list when we come back from the break. But these are the dangers of great wealth. And I think that they're all on display in the Trump presidency. I don't know Mark Zuckerberg. I don't know that much about him. Never saw the movie, and let the people decide and all that. But still, billionaires for president? Really? So anyhow, back to being rich. This is really quite remarkable. This is the piece by Charles Matthews and Evan Sandsmark in the Washington Post. It was published July 28th, last week. Being rich wrecks your soul. We used to know that, is the headline. He says, when it comes to a broad range of vice, and every single one of these suggestions is backed up by actual research. And the links to the research are in the article. Every single one of them. When it comes to a broad range of vices, the rich outperform everybody else, they write. They are much more likely than the rest of humanity to shoplift and cheat. They're more likely to be adulterers. They're more likely to drink a great deal. They're even more likely to take candy that is meant for children. Mercedes and Lexuses are more likely to cut you off than Hondas and Fords. People who drive expensive cars, more prone to run stop signs and cut off other motorists. The rich are the worst tax evaders, and as the Washington Post has detailed, they are hiding vast sums from public scrutiny in secret overseas bank accounts. They also give proportionally less to charity, not surprising, since they exhibit significantly less compassion and empathy towards suffering people. Is this starting to sound like the Trump family to you? Or, any other billionaire oligarchs that you may happen to know? This is, by the way, not all billionaires are bizarre like this. There are some people who can handle great wealth. But this is how, love of money is the root of all evil. Wealth corrupts, right? This is almost absolute power, massive wealth. Studies also find that members of the upper class are worse than ordinary folks at reading people's emotions and far more likely to be disengaged from the people with whom they're interacting. In other words, instead of actually listening to somebody, instead of actually carrying on a conversation with them, they're checking their phone, they're tapping their pencil on the doodling. Some studies go even further, suggesting that rich people, especially stockbrokers and venture capitalists, who we once called robber barons, are more competitive, impulsive, and reckless than medically diagnosed psychopaths. And by the way, these vices do not make them better entrepreneurs. They just have mommy and daddy's bank accounts in New York or the Cayman Islands to fall back on when they fail, which is certainly, I would say, true of Donald Trump. Simply being around great material wealth makes people less willing to share. This is very, very wealthy people also have a hard time enjoying simple things, savoring the everyday experiences that make life so worthwhile. because they have lower levels of empathy. They have fewer opportunities to practice acts of compassion, which studies suggest give people a great deal of pleasure. They believe that they deserve their wealth, thus dampening their capacity for gratitude, a quality that has been shown to significantly enhance our sense of well-being. And then they ask the question, how did we lose sight of this ancient wisdom about wealth, especially given all these studies from the psychological literature proving the corrosive, destructive influence of great wealth? And I think that, you know, and then the article kind of goes back to, it doesn't explicitly call out Reagan, but it points to that point in time, basically when we started down this path of celebrating wealth. And I remember the old TV show Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. And all of a sudden, during the 80s, during the Reagan era, we were celebrating riches. You recall, those of you old enough to remember, you recall in 1976, Jimmy Carter walked from the Capitol building to the White House for his inauguration. He walked in front of everybody. Reagan went in his limousine. Carter had people's balls, very low expense, very open access, you know, to dance and celebrate his inauguration that night. Reagan said, no, we're going to charge big bucks. You know, only our major donors are going to come, and you got to dress to the nines. You know, black tie and all that kind of stuff. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning of the celebration of massive wealth in the United States. So do we want Mark Zuckerberg or any other generic billionaire to be our next president? I'm inclined to say no. I would rather have, you know, another Dwight Eisenhower. I'd rather have Richard Nixon than Donald Trump. Richard Nixon at least understood how the world works. He understood politics. He had some understanding of economics. Yeah, he was corrupt, but he couldn't hold a candle to Donald Trump, in my opinion.